Inside USP Leavenworth, Kansas, America's oldest prison still costing millions. This documentary examines USP Leavenworth, the oldest federal penitentiary in the United States, through the lens of money, power, and consequence. Drawing on public records, court filings, government reports, and news investigations, the story explores how a prison built in the 19th century continues to consume tens of millions of taxpayer dollars each year. On staffing, healthcare, security, litigation, and constant maintenance, while carrying a legacy shaped by riots, lawsuits, and systemic strain. The focus is not on spectacle, but on where the money goes, and what that spending reveals about the American prison system. The oldest cage. They called it a fortress when it opened. A stone giant rising from the Kansas plains, designed to hold men the government never wanted to see again. More than a century later, the fortress still stands. And it's still costing millions. According to federal budget documents and reporting by major U.S. news outlets, the United States spends billions of dollars every year operating its prison system. Hidden inside that total is one of its oldest line items, USP Leavenworth, a prison so old that its original blueprints predate electricity as a standard utility. And yet, despite its age, despite its cracks, despite its history, the checks keep clearing. Because shutting it down would be expensive. Keeping it open is expensive. And rebuilding it? That would cost even more. This is the financial paradox of America's oldest prison. USP Leavenworth opened in 1903, long before modern ideas about incarceration, rehabilitation, or constitutional prison standards existed. It was built with inmate labor, using limestone quarried from nearby bluffs. At the time, it was celebrated as a marvel of federal authority. A place meant to centralize punishment, isolate danger, and project control. What no one planned for was the price of keeping a 19th-century prison alive in the 21st century. According to Bureau of Prisons data and congressional budget analyses, aging federal facilities are among the most expensive to operate per inmate. Old buildings weren't designed for modern surveillance systems, climate control, digital infrastructure, or contemporary healthcare demands. Every upgrade requires retrofitting stone walls never meant to carry wiring, cameras, or reinforced steel. And Leavenworth is nothing but old walls. Former staff interviews, union testimony, and court filings paint a consistent picture. Maintenance never ends. Boilers fail. Plumbing corrodes. Electrical systems overload. Security doors, some weighing hundreds of pounds, require constant inspection and replacement. Each fix costs money. Each delay risks lawsuits. Each lawsuit adds another line to the budget. According to federal court records, USP Leavenworth has been named in multiple civil rights lawsuits over the decades, including claims related to inmate safety, excessive force, and unconstitutional conditions. Whether settled or dismissed, these cases generate legal costs, government attorneys, court fees, internal investigations. None of it shows up on the prison's front gate. All of it shows up on the balance sheet. By the 1970s, Leavenworth was already under strain. The federal prison population was growing, sentencing laws were tightening, and older facilities, like Leavenworth, were being pushed beyond their original design capacity. Overcrowding became a persistent issue, documented in internal memos and later referenced in litigation. Overcrowding doesn't just increase tension. It increases cost. More inmates require more correctional officers. More officers require overtime. Overtime becomes routine. Routine overtime becomes policy. According to reporting from correctional officer unions and oversight bodies, staffing is the single largest expense in prison operations. Salaries, benefits, pensions, training, workers' compensation, these costs grow every year, regardless of whether crime rates rise or fall. At an aging facility like Leavenworth, staffing costs are compounded by design. Long corridors, blind corners, and outdated layouts require more human monitoring than modern prisons built with centralized control pods and digital surveillance. In other words, Leavenworth can't be automated cheaply. It has to be manned. And when staffing falls short, as documented in government accountability reports, mandatory overtime fills the gap. That overtime doesn't just burn budgets. It burns people. Former employees, speaking in public testimony and media interviews, have described fatigue as a constant risk factor. Fatigue leads to mistakes. Mistakes lead to incidents. Incidents lead to investigations. And investigations cost money. But the real financial pressure point came with healthcare. According to Department of Justice reports, the cost of inmate healthcare has skyrocketed nationwide, driven by an aging prison population, chronic illness, and legal requirements to provide constitutionally adequate care. USP Leavenworth, with its long history, houses a significant number of older inmates serving lengthy sentences. Older inmates need more care. More care means specialists. Specialists mean contracts. Public procurement records show that federal prisons rely heavily on private medical contractors, pharmaceutical suppliers, and off-site hospitals. Transportation alone, moving high-security inmates under guard to outside medical facilities, can cost thousands of dollars per trip. Multiply that by hundreds of visits per year. Then add emergency care. Add litigation when care is delayed or disputed. Add settlements when courts find violations. According to news investigations and court rulings, healthcare-related lawsuits have become a recurring financial risk across the federal system, including at older institutions like Leavenworth. Every claim forces the government to respond. Every response requires attorneys. Every attorney bills hours. The prison itself may be old, but the costs are aggressively modern. And then there's security. Leavenworth was built before modern classification systems, before supermax units, before electronic monitoring. Over the decades, it has been retrofitted again and again: metal detectors, cameras, reinforced doors, perimeter upgrades. Each layer added to fix what time broke. Public records show millions allocated over the years for infrastructure improvements, a phrase that sounds clean until you realize it often means patching century-old systems rather than replacing them. Replacing them would be cheaper in the long run. But replacement requires closure. Closure requires relocation. Relocation requires new construction. And new construction is politically radioactive. According to congressional hearing transcripts, lawmakers are often reluctant to fund new prisons outright, even when reports show older ones are financially inefficient. The optics are bad. The votes are risky. So the system defaults to the familiar option: keep paying to maintain what already exists. Leavenworth survives because it already exists. This is where history and finance collide. The prison's reputation, shaped by famous inmates, riots, and decades of headlines, has made it an institution unto itself. Shutting it down would be symbolic. Keeping it open is bureaucratic. Bureaucracy prefers the path of least resistance, even when it costs millions. In 1973, a major disturbance erupted inside Leavenworth, resulting in deaths and national attention. According to contemporaneous news reports and official investigations, the incident exposed severe internal tensions and systemic failures. What followed wasn't just reform, it was spending. More security measures. More staff. More oversight. Each reform added another recurring cost. Over time, Leavenworth became not just a prison, but a case study in institutional inertia. Every decade brought new standards, constitutional rulings, labor laws, medical requirements, and the prison adapted just enough to survive. Survival isn't free. By the early 2000s, internal assessments reportedly flagged Leavenworth as increasingly inefficient compared to newer facilities. Its per-inmate costs were higher. Its maintenance backlog was growing. Its design limited modernization. And yet, it stayed open. Because the alternative, a full shutdown, would require billions upfront. So instead, the government pays millions every year. According to publicly available budget summaries, federal prisons do not itemize costs per facility in a way easily accessible to taxpayers. But watchdog organizations and investigative journalists have pieced together estimates based on staffing levels, contract disclosures, and maintenance appropriations. The conclusion is consistent. Old prisons are financial sinkholes. Not because of corruption. Not because of spectacle. But because time is expensive. And nowhere is that clearer than at USP Leavenworth. The walls that once symbolized permanence now symbolize obligation. Every stone holds history. Every crack demands a check. And the question no one seems willing to answer is simple. How long can America afford to keep paying for its past? Because inside Leavenworth, the cells may be locked, but the spending never stops. The cost of control. The prison doesn't sleep. It consumes. Every hour, every shift change, every locked door carries a price tag. At USP Leavenworth, that price isn't theoretical. It's recorded in payroll systems, procurement contracts, and federal ledgers that rarely make headlines. According to public budget documents and oversight reports, control is the most expensive promise a prison makes. Not rehabilitation. Not deterrence. Control. And at a prison built before the invention of modern correctional science, control has to be bought again and again. Unlike newer federal facilities designed with centralized surveillance, automated locking systems, and open sightlines, Leavenworth's layout reflects a 19th century philosophy: thick walls, long corridors, layered cell blocks. The design looks imposing, but financially, it's inefficient. Every blind corner requires a human presence. Every outdated lock requires manual checks. Every movement requires staff. According to testimony from correctional officer unions and findings referenced in government accountability reviews, older prisons require significantly higher staffing ratios to maintain security. Where modern facilities rely on cameras and control rooms, Leavenworth relies on people. People cost money. Correctional officers are federal employees. Their compensation includes base salary, overtime, health insurance, retirement contributions, hazard pay, and disability coverage. When staffing levels drop, due to illness, injury, or vacancies, overtime fills the gap. Overtime isn't occasional. It's structural. Multiple news investigations into the Bureau of Prisons have documented chronic understaffing across the federal system, particularly at older facilities. When a post must be filled, and no one is available, the shift is extended. Sometimes by hours. Sometimes by days. Those hours are paid at premium rates. According to public payroll data analyzed by watchdog organizations, overtime can add millions of dollars annually to a single institution's operating costs. And that doesn't account for burnout-related turnover, which triggers recruitment and training expenses. Training isn't cheap. New officers must complete federal instruction programs, background checks, medical screenings, and on-the-job mentoring. At a complex facility like Leavenworth, training is longer and more specialized because the building itself presents unique risks. Stairs instead of ramps. Manual gates instead of electronic locks. Legacy systems layered over modern policy. Every new hire must learn how to operate a prison that was never designed to operate this way. And when mistakes happen, they don't just create danger, they create liability. Court filings and Department of Justice reports show that federal prisons, including USP Leavenworth, have faced claims related to use of force, failure to protect inmates, and unsafe conditions. Some cases are dismissed. Some settle. All cost money. Settlements are paid by taxpayers. Legal defense is paid by taxpayers. Internal investigations are paid by taxpayers. The cost of control doesn't end at the gate. Inside the walls, another budget grows quietly: healthcare. According to publicly available DOJ data, inmate healthcare spending has risen dramatically over the past 2 decades. The reasons are documented and largely uncontested: longer sentences, older inmates, chronic illness, mental health needs, and constitutional obligations. Federal prisons cannot refuse care. Courts have repeatedly ruled that deliberate indifference to serious medical needs violates the Constitution. That standard applies regardless of a facility's age or condition. At Leavenworth, healthcare is complicated by infrastructure. The prison was not built with modern clinics in mind. Examination rooms, infirmaries, and mental health units have been carved out of existing space, often requiring renovations that must meet both medical and security standards. Those renovations require contractors. Public procurement records show recurring contracts for medical services, pharmaceutical supply, diagnostic testing, and specialist care. Many services are outsourced, particularly when advanced treatment is required. Outsourcing introduces another cost layer: transport. When an inmate needs off-site care, the prison must provide secure transportation. That means vehicles, fuel, maintenance, and multiple officers assigned for the duration of the trip. According to court filings in healthcare-related cases, even a routine hospital visit can involve a full security detail. One appointment can cost thousands. Multiply that by hundreds each year. Then add emergency care. Add chronic disease management. Add mental health treatment. According to reports by federal oversight bodies, mental health services are among the most strained and expensive components of prison health care. Older facilities often lack adequate therapeutic spaces, requiring retrofits or transfers to other institutions. Transfers cost money. Retrofits cost money. Lawsuits over inadequate care cost money. The financial pressure builds quietly line by line. But healthcare isn't the only hidden expense. Maintenance is relentless. Leavenworth's age means that nothing is simple. Replacing a pipe isn't just plumbing, it's security planning, asbestos mitigation, historical preservation compliance, and post-repair inspection. Each step adds cost. Public records related to federal facilities maintenance show that aging buildings accumulate what's known as a deferred maintenance backlog. Repairs postponed due to budget constraints. Over time, deferred maintenance becomes emergency maintenance, which is always more expensive. A slow leak becomes a flood. A worn cable becomes a system failure. Emergency repairs don't wait for fiscal years. They demand immediate funding. According to Government Accountability Office analyses, deferred maintenance across federal prisons totals billions nationwide. Facilities like Leavenworth contribute disproportionately because of their age and complexity. And yet, they remain operational. Why? Because closing a prison isn't just a construction decision. It's a political one. Closing Leavenworth would require relocating inmates to other facilities, many already operating near capacity. That would trigger transfers, staffing changes, and new infrastructure demands elsewhere. It would also require addressing the economic impact on the surrounding community. Prisons are employers. According to regional economic studies, facilities like Leavenworth, provide stable federal jobs that support local economies. Closure means job loss. Job loss means political backlash. So instead of closure, the system chooses continuity. Continuity has a price. Security upgrades are another recurring expense. Modern prisons rely on integrated digital surveillance. Leavenworth relies on a patchwork. Cameras have been added over time, but the building's design limits coverage. According to security assessments cited in court records, blind spots remain an ongoing concern. To compensate, more officers are deployed. More officers mean more payroll. More payroll means higher budgets. Then there's perimeter security. Fences must be reinforced. Sensors installed. Lighting upgraded. Each improvement requires procurement processes, contractor bids, and long-term maintenance agreements. These aren't one-time costs. They recur. According to publicly available federal spending summaries, security infrastructure contracts often include multi-year service obligations. That means the government isn't just paying for equipment, it's paying for upkeep. And when technology changes, old systems become obsolete. Replacing them costs more than installing them did in the first place. Inside the prison, daily operations add their own financial weight. Food services, laundry, utilities. Older buildings are energy inefficient. Heating and cooling thick stone structures requires substantial power. According to federal energy usage reports, older facilities consume more energy per square foot than modern ones. Energy costs fluctuate. Budgets must absorb the swings. Water systems, too, are outdated. Leavenworth's plumbing predates modern efficiency standards. Leaks and pressure issues are frequent enough to require ongoing monitoring and repair. Every repair order adds another invoice. Even waste disposal carries a premium. Security protocols require specialized handling, contracted services, and compliance audits. None of this appears dramatic on screen. None of it goes viral. But it drains money all the same. And then there's litigation. Even when claims are unproven, they must be addressed. According to DOJ disclosures, responding to inmate litigation is a routine operational cost. Each case requires document production, staff interviews, and legal review. The majority of cases never reach trial. That doesn't make them cheap. Legal defense is a standing expense built into the system. And when courts rule against the government, as they have in some conditions of confinement cases nationwide, the costs can escalate quickly. Court-ordered reforms often require staffing increases, facility upgrades, or policy changes. Each reform carries a price tag. What emerges from all of this is a pattern. Leavenworth isn't expensive because it's extraordinary. It's expensive because it's old. Age turns every function into a premium service. Age turns routine operations into specialized projects. Age turns control into a constant negotiation between safety and solvency. According to analysts who study correctional budgets, the federal prison system faces a choice it has been postponing for decades: continue paying to sustain aging institutions, or invest heavily in replacements. Both options are expensive. One is just more visible than the other. So the spending continues, quietly justified as necessary, unavoidable routine. Inside Leavenworth, the gates still close. The lights still turn on. The officers still report for duty. And every day, the meter keeps running. Because control, once promised, can never be refunded. Paying for the past. There is a moment in every system where history becomes a bill. It arrives quietly, buried in appropriations language and line item summaries that few people ever read. It doesn't come with a warning label. It doesn't announce itself as a crisis. It simply demands payment, again. According to public budget documents and congressional testimony, the federal government has long known that aging prisons, like Leavenworth, are among the least cost-efficient facilities in the Bureau of Prisons system. Internal assessments have repeatedly flagged structural obsolescence, rising maintenance costs, and operational inefficiencies. And yet, year after year, the funding continues. Because history is expensive to undo. Leavenworth's age doesn't just create maintenance problems, it creates legal ones. Over more than a century of operation, the prison has accumulated not just inmates, but precedent. Policies, practices, and institutional habits formed in earlier eras don't always align with modern legal standards. When they clash, courts get involved. According to court records and DOJ summaries, federal prisons nationwide, including Leavenworth, have faced waves of litigation tied to evolving interpretations of constitutional rights. What was once acceptable confinement becomes, decades later, unlawful conditions. Each shift in legal standards triggers a financial response. Policies must be rewritten. Facilities must be altered. Staff must be retrained. Training costs money. Renovations cost money. Compliance audits cost money. And when compliance fails, or is alleged to fail, the system pays again. Settlements, while often confidential, are not rare. News reporting has shown that the federal government routinely resolves prison-related lawsuits through negotiated agreements to avoid prolonged litigation. These settlements may include monetary compensation, but they also include mandated changes that carry long-term costs. Add more staff. Expand services. Upgrade infrastructure. All inside a building never meant to support them. At Leavenworth, the past is physically present. Thick stone walls that once symbolized permanence now resist modernization. Every upgrade becomes a negotiation between historical preservation, security requirements, and legal mandates. That negotiation always ends the same way, with a higher invoice. According to Government Accountability Office findings, retrofitting old federal facilities is often more expensive per square foot than constructing new ones. But construction requires upfront capital, environmental reviews, land acquisition, and political consensus. Retrofitting can be justified as maintenance. Maintenance sounds cheaper, even when it isn't. This is how costs hide in plain sight. Another invisible expense comes from classification limits. Modern prisons are designed with flexible housing units that can be reconfigured as populations change. Leavenworth is rigid. Its layout restricts how inmates can be separated, grouped, or transferred internally. When classification options are limited, management options shrink. That leads to transfers. Transferring inmates between federal facilities is expensive. According to Bureau of Prisons operational data, transfers involve secure transport teams, coordination across districts, and administrative processing. Each move carries a cost, not just in money, but in manpower. Transfers are often used to relieve pressure created by overcrowding, staffing shortages, or facility limitations. At an old prison, those pressures are constant. So the system compensates by moving people instead of rebuilding space. That solution costs money every time. Then, there is the cost of risk. Older facilities carry higher risk profiles. According to insurance analysis and internal risk assessments cited in investigative reporting, aging infrastructure increases the likelihood of accidents, slips, falls, equipment failures, and structural incidents. When staff are injured, workers' compensation claims follow. When inmates are injured, lawsuits may follow. Risk isn't abstract. It's actuarial. Each incident adds to the long-term financial burden through insurance premiums, disability payments, and settlement reserves. And none of it reduces future risk, because the building doesn't get younger. There is also the cost of reputation. Leavenworth's name carries weight. It has appeared in books, court opinions, and headlines for over a century. That notoriety affects staffing and retention. According to reporting on federal corrections recruitment, facilities with difficult reputations often struggle to attract experienced personnel. Recruitment incentives cost money. Retention bonuses cost money. Vacancies cost overtime. Overtime costs compound. A single unfilled position doesn't just affect one shift. It affects the entire staffing matrix. According to labor analyses cited by correctional unions, chronic vacancies create cascading overtime obligations that inflate budgets beyond initial projections. And because federal prisons must maintain minimum staffing levels for safety, those obligations are non-negotiable. You can delay a renovation. You can postpone a purchase. You cannot leave a post unmanned. So the money flows. Beyond operations, there is the cost of scrutiny. Older prisons are more likely to be audited, inspected, and reviewed. According to DOJ oversight frameworks, facilities with known infrastructure challenges receive increased attention from inspectors general and compliance teams. Inspections require preparation. Preparation requires staff time. Staff time costs money. Findings require responses. Responses require plans. Plans require funding. Each cycle generates new obligations. And while none of this is unique to Leavenworth, its age amplifies every effect. The question, then, is not whether Leavenworth is expensive. The question is why it is still being paid for this way. According to testimony from criminal justice experts and budget analysts, the answer lies in a phenomenon known as sunk cost inertia. The idea is simple. When an institution has already consumed enormous resources, decision-makers become reluctant to abandon it, even when future costs outweigh potential benefits. Leavenworth has consumed more than a century of investment. Closing it feels like admitting loss. So the system reframes the spending as responsibility. Responsibility to staff. Responsibility to inmates. Responsibility to history. But responsibility has a price. According to long-term federal budget projections, correction spending is expected to remain a significant expense even as crime rates fluctuate. Aging facilities are a major factor in that projection. Each year they remain open, they consume funds that could be allocated elsewhere. Education, infrastructure, healthcare outside prison walls. This isn't a moral argument. It's an accounting one. Money spent maintaining the past cannot be spent building the future. And yet, the future remains abstract. The past is concrete. Leavenworth stands. So the checks continue. There have been discussions. According to news reports and policy papers, proposals have circulated for years about consolidating federal facilities, closing older prisons, or replacing them with modern complexes. Each proposal runs into the same barriers: cost, politics, time. Building a new prison requires billions upfront. Closing an old one requires political courage. Transferring operations requires coordination across states. So the system chooses delay. Delay has become policy. Meanwhile, the bills keep coming. Utilities increase. Healthcare costs rise. Labor contracts adjust for inflation. Even doing nothing costs more each year. This is the quiet truth of Leavenworth's finances. There is no neutral option. Keeping the prison exactly as it is still increases spending. And yet, for many taxpayers, Leavenworth is invisible. There is no public-facing invoice. No annual breakdown mailed to households. No reminder that part of every federal tax dollar supports a stone structure built before modern electricity. That invisibility is part of why the system persists. What isn't seen isn't debated. What isn't debated isn't changed. According to transparency advocates, one of the greatest challenges in prison reform, financial or otherwise, is the lack of accessible data. Without clear facility-level cost reporting, accountability remains diffuse. Leavenworth benefits from that diffusion, not because of secrecy, but because of complexity. The money doesn't go to one place. It goes everywhere. Payroll systems, healthcare contracts, maintenance vendors, legal departments, each justified, each defensible, each expensive, and together, they form a machine that runs not on intent, but on momentum. Inside Leavenworth, the doors still close with the same sound they made decades ago. The routine remains familiar. Counts, meals, shifts, lockdowns. What's changed is the price. What once cost thousands now costs millions. What once required guards now requires systems. What once was built to last forever now requires constant repair. America's oldest prison is no longer just a place of confinement. It is a financial artifact. A living reminder that institutions outlive the assumptions that created them, and that dismantling them can be more expensive than maintaining them. For now. Because eventually, the math changes. Stone erodes. Systems fail. Costs exceed tolerance. And when that moment comes, the question won't be whether Leavenworth is historic. The question will be whether history is still affordable. Until then, the prison remains open. The lights stay on. And the money keeps flowing.